God, I cannot remember when I definitely figured out that she should have a dead Pegasus. How did it happen?
Kelly Thompson's here, everybody. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, this is the first time you've been on this show, but I saw you on other podcasts and I was like, okay, I'm asking. I've read enough books that I like of yours that I need to have you on the show and we need to talk about those books. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Absolute Wonder Woman is just a freight train.
Maybe a little bit has to do,
Ah.
right? I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I feel like I learn about new podcasts every day, which is sort of cool. That I mean, I had a podcast myself at one point, so
Yeah.
I just think it's a really great way for like a great and cheap way, right? For comics, which is very fan built to me. Like, you don't get the same kind of advertising and revenue streams and all these things. We're all sort of in it for love. And I
Yes.
think a lot of the podcasts I go on, you can really feel that. Like these people are just there for their enjoyment, for their like whether they can build a giant podcasting business or not out of it is sort of secondary. They just love comics and they want to talk about comics. So it's honestly mostly a treat for me, like
Nice.
to just talk to people.
What made you want to do your own podcast, and when did you decide, all right, I need to make the transition from here to writing? And
I do think podcasting helped me get there a little faster. I've talked a lot on shows and with people about how I'm very slow. My process is sort of embarrassingly plodding.
methodical.
Yeah, and that gives it a structure that I'm not sure it warrants, but sure, let's go with that. But so I think the podcasting, even though I already should have been writing at that point, I mean, I was writing in my off time, but I wasn't making big pushes to break into comics. But we had an interview portion. We didn't start out that way, but we ended up, so we would do like the first half of the show would be like reviews and stuff, and then we'd have an interview in the back half. And talking to so many creators, including editors, I just found I was making really good connections with them. They weren't really forced connections, which I think was what was intriguing about it and made me think maybe there was something there. Not just that people were open to and looking for women writers or something, which I'm sure was part of it. I also just felt like I had a lot in common with them. Like they seemed to like me and I liked them, and it seemed like I could build relationships there. And so I do think that in a weird way, it was something that gave some legitimacy to the other thing I was doing that seemed sort of separate, which was writing all this stuff, in the
Yeah.
darkness of my room or whatever. And so shining some light on it in these like talking to editors and stuff and like being like, oh, I could do this. Like it really um I don't know if demystified is the word, but it really
Yeah.
took away some of its power and some of its fear to like just connect with those people and know that I'd made connections and know that those were people who, even though I was still sort of a nobody, I probably could get them to email me back. Like it
Right.
seemed like, oh, maybe that's how you could start this process, and that really was what happened. The first, I was talking to DC at one point, but I can't remember exactly how the timeline was. But I had an interview with a couple Marvel editors, and I ended up through Janine Schaefer, actually, who's no longer there. She's been a bunch of other places since then. She I ended up talking to her about, because there's like a whole document you have to sign before you can even pitch to Marvel. Like
Really?
a very serious document. And I get it, but like it's not that easy to get it. So like there was waiting, there was talking to the right people, there were all these things, and then finally I had the document and I was able to sign it and get it processed, and that meant I could like send them a pitch. And so I sent them Hawkeye Investigations,
Nice. Well, which is a
which
fantastic book.
yeah, well, it did eventually become Hawkeye,
Well,
but it had
transformed,
a
yeah, but
yeah, it had a weird path though. It wasn't like I submitted that and then they were like, "Oh yeah, we love this idea." It was more like I submitted it, it probably sat somewhere not being read for a long time. I got separately, I got the Captain Marvel and the Carol Core co-writing gig with Kelly Sue DeConnick. Like, maybe those things are linked, maybe not. I'll probably never really know. And then while we were doing that, we started talking about this Hawkeye thing. But again, it's like when you're on the outside, it all looks so confusing and it feels like you can't break in or you don't know what they want or what they're doing. And once you've seen behind the curtain, it all makes a little more sense as to why it's so mystifying because, they have really long ranging plans and they have all these people in rooms talking about, hey, this is the way this is going and this is the way, it's like a weatherman or something, right? Where they're like forecasting panner and they're making their plans and so a Hawkeye book doesn't necessarily just fit like, hey, I'd love that to come out in the fall. And so sure enough, we ended up being part of that the all new initiative.
Yes.
And that was how she was able to get a Hawkeye book in that like made sense at the time. So I think I was writing Captain Marvel and the Carol Core, co-writing that in 2015. And I think Hawkeye came out in 2017, like early
Mm,
2017. So it takes time. Even once you're in there, it takes a while for that to happen.
yeah,
And there was other stuff in between that, like I did A-Force, sort
which is
of
great. I
between
loved
those
A
two.
Force. You did Gem and the Holograms around
I did. That was my
2014.
first gig. Yeah, that came out in 2015. That was my first published work other than a short that I had done with Stephanie Hahn for a womanthology for a charity anthology kind of a thing.
Gotcha, gotcha. Uh, when it came, I just have to ask about Gem and the Holograms because because that was one of your first like published works, but also because did you watch Gem? Were you a
I
fan?
did. I did. I was a fan. I mean, it had been a long time ago, obviously,
Oh,
but
sure.
I had been a fan. And when I was doing the pitch with Sophie Campbell, I rewatched all of it, and it was both really enlightening and fun, and the music was sometimes surprisingly good, and it was also like really shocking because Gem was something that was pretty diverse and like, it was feminist to a point that you can
Sure.
get in a cartoon and
In the 80s,
there were
yeah.
all these there were these adopted daughters, so there was like racial diversity. They knew and were friends with and helped a school for girls that was like an orphanage. Like, so there was all this really progressive stuff that they were trying to do, and that was great for us because it really laid the groundwork for us trying to make something that felt genuinely more progressive and like that pushed those things forward a bit. So it
Yeah.
was fun. It was a great experience. It was just wild that it was my first thing because, Jem had some real heat on it that year. Um, Although the movie ended up being this huge nightmare, people were talking about it and there was all this interest and everything. But we got the previews cover. That's what it was. And
Oh, yeah.
I've never gotten that since.
That's
my
outrageous. Oh,
my
geez.
whole career so far. It's like you can't start at the top, man, then you're in trouble.
I know, yeah. My wife got you on my radar because of your Rogan Gambit book,
Oh,
which
nice.
there was this real like undercurrent of fear when it comes to the Rogan Gambit dichotomy and their
Mhm.
series, which is that when are they going to break up?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could feel this kind of like real fear and tension in every issue where I'm like, oh no, it's going so well. Uh, was that a thing that you actually like wanted to have in there where you're like, I know that you are reading a Marvel book and I'm introducing you to characters that are kind of like together in a very permanent fashion, and that might make you a little twitchy. So here's something that may assuage those feelings.
Yeah, I think so when I got that Rogan Gambit gig, they didn't want me, or when I started writing it rather, as opposed to when I finished writing it,
Yeah.
we were keeping it pretty loose about whether they should want to be together or not at the
Hmm.
end, which was sort of a high wire act a little bit to because I needed to build it in such a way that at the end I
You
could
could
be
do either.
saying, yeah, that at the end they could just be saying we should just be friends for now or whatever. This is toxic. We can't keep doing this. Or that they could be like, this is worth it and let's figure it out. And it was pretty hard. I think I'm lucky that they wanted them together because I was definitely writing it more that direction because that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
I was not super excited about the wedding. I liked the idea of them being married, and I thought it might offer them some nice protection for being broken up and messed with a lot.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, I was able to get on board, but I really did not like them sort of taking Kitty and Colossus's wedding. I thought it was I
They're kind of
understand. I
stunty.
listen. The Kitty's hand phasing through a wedding ring is peak. You have
It's
to
a
use
great
that.
visual.
If
Yeah.
someone comes up with that idea, you have to use it. So now the I wasn't in the room, but now it's been said, and I think every writer in that room, whether that's what they wanted or not, they go, "Oh, we're doing that now,"
Yeah.
because you just sometimes an idea like that just takes over the room. It's honestly sort of cool and magical and wild to watch it happen. I wasn't there for that one, but,
That being
uh,
said, I didn't see it.
yeah, I've just seen it in other ways with
Yeah.
other things that aren't the hand phasing through the whatever.
Right. But it's a
Uh,
good metaphor. Yeah.
yeah, but it's pretty tacky to take someone else's wedding, and, Rogue and Gambit are already maybe not considered the classiest, and so I was worried about that for them and everything, but I think at some point you have to realize the train is going on this in this direction and I can either jump on and be a part of it and make it as good as I think it can be, or I can fight it and lose. And so, I got on board and I was very lucky that I was in the right place at the right time. And so I was able to get the Mr. and Mrs. X book and Guggenheim and everyone was also really nice about, sort of letting me help out a little bit and like coordinating with me on how to get because here we're going to have the wedding in X-Men Gold, not in Mr. and Mrs. X, but then I felt it was really important that we also show it. So then we're having to coordinate a lot of that overlapping stuff. So it was a pretty tricky start, but I was very lucky that everyone was willing to get on board. And I have to say, I'm really glad, they're in Gail's hands now. She clearly has no intention of breaking them up either. And I love that. I mean, I'm sure she'll play with it. You have to play with it, but it's clear that she's a fan of them together. And that makes me really happy. And if them being married keeps and helps them stay together, I mean, how funny is it for them to end up being like
One of the more stable relationships.
the quote unquote boring stable relationship in the X-Men comics is pretty hilarious.
I was thinking my only example I have right now is just like the depiction of Zoe and Wash from Firefly, where I'm like, look at these two and how they're actually in a relationship and they're married and they have their ups and downs, but like there's no question about whether it's going to stay together or not. It's just nice. But
yeah, but then they had to kill that guy.
I know that kills me. Oh, trust me. That unbelievable. And they only killed him. Yeah. Every time I watch Dodgeball, I'm like, damn it, there he is doing that instead of signing the contract. Because, I don't know.
Oh, is that what it was? Is that what it was?
Oh, yeah. No, everybody had to sign contracts for multi-picture deals. Mm-hmm. And Tudyk's like, I'm a rocket.
Yeah.
I am not going to be able to stick around for like 3 or 4 Serenity movies. And I'm like, well, I got news for you. There ain't gonna be no more Serenity movies. Everybody who couldn't sign on had to die, and I was like, no. I remember when that movie was coming out. This is just going to talk about Serenity now. Oh no. But when that movie was coming out, I saw a review online that was a non-spoiler review. I'm like, oh, good, non-spoiler. I just need to know if it's good or not. And it said, despite the fact that 2 of the main characters die, and I'm like, So that is a very unique experience watching that movie, knowing 2 of the crew are gonna die. Because in the opening chase sequence, when Jane gets the spear through his leg, I'm like, oh, here's where Jane dies. Okay, yes, that makes sense. But that's okay. It's all right. If Jane goes, that means one's left. I understand. When Kaylee gets shot with the things, I'm like, oh no, Kaylee's gonna die. Can I live with that? I guess. Oh well, obviously maybe River can die. That's okay. That would make sense. And Simon and Kaylee can be together. And then Wash gets impaled, and I'm like, I saw it in the theater. I was devastated. And then there's a moment like later in the movie when Kaylee asks where Wash is and Zoe just loading her shotgun. She's like, he ain't coming. It finally hit the person behind me, just goes, no! Like he's just had been building to that
Yeah.
reaction for like 10
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
Like, oh
It's
no.
rough.
It was
It's
rough.
rough. It's
It's
rough.
hard. It's hard to fall in love with fictional characters because they're not yours.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. It's a plight we all share. I think I try I'm pretty sensitive to it as a writer because
sure.
I'm never that far from it as a reader too.
Yeah.
Um I will say that I've noticed, especially on it's more true of this in TV than comics, I think, for me. But if I've got a TV show I'm really invested in,
Yeah.
um, if I can feel some trust in the creators, I find I'm more willing to let them explore if I feel like they have the right end goal in mind.
Yes.
This is I'm falling very into like real fanatical behavior
Yes.
here, but like, here's a dumb example that's separate from
Sure. Yeah.
comics and a show I didn't finish watching possibly for this reason because I
Sure.
lost sort of faith, but I was very impressed with that. I mean, there's a lot that was bad about it, but that Teen Wolf show that was on MTV like
Oh yeah.
however long ago that what's his name who's become sort of a star that played Styles. What is that guy's name?
Oh
Oh my
man.
god.
Yes.
Styles and Lydia, rarely have I seen two characters that are more like meant to be together, and the writers were deliberately keeping them apart, but it was enjoyable. It was a great tension, and
Yeah.
I was like, I'm having trouble enjoying this, especially when they kept pairing them off with other people, and
Right.
I'm like, I'm having trouble enjoying this, but if I could just feel more confident that they understood and that I could understand that they're driving these two people to be together eventually, I think I could relax and enjoy it more.
Yeah.
And I sort of never got there, and I didn't end up finishing the show for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons, but that was probably part of it.
Oh yeah. Oh
Um
no. That was me and Castle. I watched a lot of Castle,
oh
and I'm like, I felt the artificial like hand manipulating the show, and I'm like, I
yeah.
can't. And it's like why I don't really watch a lot of TV at this point, where I'm like,
Yeah.
I just can't. I'm like, ah,
Oh, Dylan O'Brien, that's
Dylan
his name.
O'Brien. Thank
Sorry.
you. No,
You must be a big you're like me, you're a big Nathan Fillion fan, huh?
I am a Nathan Fillion fan. I will, he's just endless charisma. I
He
watch
is.
him anytime.
So I know him from before all of this when he was on One Life to Live, the soap opera. I
Oh
watched that as a kid or a
man.
teenager or something, and he was so much better. Like you just knew. You would just watch him in
Oh,
a scene and you just yeah, he just
like
he had
Clooney when
it.
he was on it.
He had
Like
yes, 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 he had it even back then. I was like, "Who is this guy?" He was
right.
charismatic, he was handsome, he was very young, so he was like really physical and he's very
Sure.
tall, especially in that like soap opera space. And
Yes.
he had so much charisma and likability. I followed him always.
Yeah.
I was very upset when he was one of the choices for Angel,
Oh
which
my God. Wow.
in retrospect is sort of hilarious.
Oh my
Like,
God.
I think you'd never recast David Boreanaz,
Nope.
having seen what
Perfect.
he's done, he's fantastic, but
Yep.
if you squint, you can see what Nathan Fillion would have done with it, and you
Yeah.
can also see the ways in which it would have held him back. Like, one of the most fun things about David Boreanaz's Angel is when he's being, like, petty
Yes.
and funny and not the brooding guy, but I think Nathan Fillion, the balance might have been really off, and it's a sort of a great example to me of like incredible actors. We're going to use this guy Fillion, but this isn't the right spot for it.
Yeah.
It's good. It reminds you these people sometimes know what they're doing.
It's true. Yeah. So let's make him Guy Gardner.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
is
down
it
because
listen,
I like
it's
Nathan
a
Fillion. I'm like, well, I'm
well
watching.
that's what I was going to say. But
Yeah.
at the risk of getting angry DC fans, although
No, no, no.
are there super Guy Gardner fans out there that are
There
going to get mad
are
at me?
because no, I'll take the blame because I routinely bag on Guy Gardner,
Mm.
and I was very quick to learn how many Guy Gardner stands there are out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm not super well versed, but Guy Gardner certainly is not my guy. But casting Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner.
It goes a long way.
That's your best shot you've got at making me like that character, I gotta say.
I'm
So,
completely on board with that.
it's
Yeah.
like a chess move, maybe. I'm
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
it.
it's their, like, Guy Gardner world tour. They're like, "How are we gonna get Guy Gardner working? We'll cast one of the most charismatic actors."
Likable
Yeah,
guys, yeah, yeah.
put him in there. I'm in. Although that haircut is, it takes a few points away. But that
Are
being
they
said,
really doing that
the
haircut? I
bowl
mean,
cut, oh, yeah. No, I've seen the set
ugh,
photos, and it is, it's a choice.
ugh,
Uh,
great.
yeah. Speaking of DC, obviously. Oh no! Before we get into DC, I want to talk about Black Widow because I love that book. Such an incredible
Thank you.
book. Uh, Congratulations on such a terrific series. I believe you won the Eisner for Black Widow,
We did. We
so
did.
that was also
It
a
was
feather in your cap, so to speak. Uh,
Yeah, it was very
Dope.
gratifying, especially with that team, which was mostly
Yeah,
women. It was really all women, except for when we would sometimes have guest artists filling in or doing certain sections because we had artists doing sections here and there.
yeah,
It was like all female team. I loved doing that book. I didn't know if Marvel was gonna get where I was going after the first one, where I think the obvious choice was for her to like go on a mission of revenge. And I just didn't want to
yeah,
do that. I wanted to try to say, this experience has changed her. We can't obviously keep this baby on the board in a way that it's gonna, because of the way comics work, it's only gonna end up holding her back. And I didn't
yeah,
want to do that. But I also wanted, the whole point of giving her the child and the whole story was at this point in Natasha's life, what gets through? Like, you've seen and done everything. So what gets through and really makes you rethink how things are? And so I thought if I could create this really emotional experience for her and this sort of sad thing she has to carry that's also a win,
yeah,
I thought if I could do that, we might really have something on our hands. And I had a lot of really great help in Elena and Jordy especially. But then I thought, I really gotta I've gotta feel that change in her. Otherwise, what are we doing here? If after 5 issues, she's just reverting to type, I don't think we've done what we needed to do.
Well, speaking of the last thing at Marvel, I want to talk about in this conversation specifically. Deadpool was such a great series and was
Thank
such a
you.
fun run. What gave you the idea to go like, all right, Monster Island, and also we must have Elsa Bloodstone? I assume it's because you desperately want to do an Elsa Bloodstone book and they just won't let you. I mean, right? Because like,
There's definitely truth to that for sure. I mean, you take a character you love and you keep putting them in new things, hoping it's gonna connect in a
maybe
way
this
that
one.
people will, yeah, let you run with it. But I did think she was a really good fit because I
Yeah,
thought she was a really interesting love interest for him because she's grown up with the most disgusting shit you could ever imagine since she was very little, depending on what canon you want to believe, since she was
right.
a baby, maybe.
Yeah.
And so she's not going to be disgusted by Wade's face the way I am. She's going to be like, whatever. I mean, some of my favorite lines in that where she's like, yeah, looking at your face is like looking at boring wallpaper. And I thought, yes, like
Yeah.
that's what you're hoping for if you're Wade. Boring wallpaper, that is a
I'll
win.
take it.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I saw an opportunity to bring Jeff in. The real truth of the King of Monsters story is that when I was first working on it with Jake Thomas, who is just a fantastic editor and also a fantastic writer, I should say, um, which is which in the hands of a lesser editor is dangerous. Like
Mm,
sometimes you don't want your editor to be too good a writer because you're the writer.
yeah.
But a really great editor like Jake, I don't know, he never got in the way. I never felt his ego. I never felt him trying to write over me. But
Yeah.
I will also say that whenever he made suggestions, I fucking took those suggestions because they were good. They were good. He's genuinely really funny and smart, and it was a joy to work with him. Anyway, so when we were developing Deadpool, we were doing something that I thought was really fun, and I think he liked too, that was bringing in more sort of guest stars. It was like basically like Deadpool forming a sort of Magnificent Seven Samurai kind of a vibe
Yeah.
where they were getting together to, so he was trying to con all these A-listers into being on the team,
Yep.
and of course, he's got mostly, like, D-listers, and then it was either we were briefly using She-Hulk, and then she, like, sees the lineup and, like, walks out, and, like, so there were some fun stuff like that, and then I think it was Spider-Man we were gonna use because he sees the lineup, but he's like, "Are you kidding me?" But then he doesn't leave, and so he
Right.
ends up helping anyway because he's Spider-Man.
Yep.
Um, so it was really fun. We were playing with a lot of interesting, weird characters, and I thought it was gonna be really great, but when Jake and I were looking at it more and more, we were like, "Hmm, it's a great story." They're like, "And maybe we do it later."
Mhm.
But we need a bigger idea. Like, this is a big launch. This has been relaunched a lot recently. We really got to come out swinging. And so we came up with this King of Monsters idea, this idea that there was some legal precedent that the monsters owned Staten Island from some old rules back in the 1700s or something when
Mhm.
America was formed. And so now they were trying to like make good on that claim and just sort of the weird monster rules we could play with and the things we could do with Staten Island. I think pandemic really killed us. I
Mm.
mean, it hit I think it was hit on issue 4 or between 4 and 5
Yeah.
and we just never recovered. I think we were always a little bit weird of a book maybe.
Mhm.
Chris Bocello is an incredible
Ugh,
artist,
totally.
one
Yeah.
of my absolute favorites. You get so much creativity, and he really made me push on the format a lot, which I
Mhm.
really appreciate, and the formula.
Yeah.
But he's also not everyone's cup of tea, especially if you're doing a lot of crazy stuff. It can feel overwhelming. I wonder sometimes if I needed to edit down a little bit
Hmm.
once I knew Chris was in the mix, like just to make sure we got the right alchemy there. It ended up being a great time. I loved the messages in that. I loved the theme in that. I thought Elsa and Wade are a great pairing. I thought it was crazy that nobody tried to keep that going after I left.
I
I thought there were really good bones there that I
Yeah.
hoped would survive, but alas.
Yeah. Deadpool can't seem to carry a book more than like a dozen or so issues nowadays, which is outrageous given
Yes.
the
Yeah.
the proliferation of the character and how popular he is, how popular he's been for 30 years, and yet
Yeah.
just there's a weird thing with that. But I think you're right about. I think you hit on something with the pandemic, 'cause that was definitely something that they had no, you had no control over that, and it was just
Yeah, it really killed us. We were lucky we got to 10, honestly. I think
yeah.
we were already drawing 7 or 8, I think, and I was working on 9 or something like that, and they wanted to kill it. I think they wanted to kill it at 6.
Ugh.
Like, yeah, kill stuff that we'd even already finished, and I was like, "Come on, man. We've already got this stuff drawn." Um,
Yeah.
Maybe it was 7. It was something after the X-Men issue, whichever
Okay.
one that was.
Yeah.
But, I was able to talk them into letting us, like, finish up our arc, and that part of the agreement there was that the 10th issue would tie in to the King in Black stuff, and that would be an oversized bookend issue, which honestly, in some ways felt right for it. I mean, the King of Monsters thing, I think it had a ton of legs, and it had a
Yeah.
ton of places to go. But if we were gonna get sort of kneecapped because of the pandemic, 10 wasn't a bad like I felt very thankful to Marvel that they sort of let us get there and let us wrap it up in a nice way as opposed to just sort of
Just
leaving it dangling. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So I
Uh,
was very grateful in that regard.
Fair enough. I love Birds of Prey. I think it's a fantastic book. It was such a unexpected delight where it just shows up and then kicks in the door. I loved your use of Barda, Zealot getting in there, Cassie, just this inclusion of these characters. I mean, obviously, I'm like, yeah, and Dinah's great, but holy crap, we get to see like Barda being used like in a really fun way, and having her play off of these characters that she would never. I don't think you'd ever see Barda and Cassie in a room together, much less Zealot being involved. Was there any, um, previous love of these characters from like Wildstorm or DC where you were like, one day I'm gonna get these guys in a room and it's gonna be
Yeah.
good.
It's less that I was like I had a specific idea for these specific characters and it was more of like, oh, DC is letting me do sort of whatever I want for this Birds of Prey book. Like they're not restricting me yet.
Yeah.
So, and this is my first DC project. It might be my last DC project. I'm gonna just gonna reach for everything that I love, everything that I think's cool. I want Dinah, I want Barda, I want Cass. Let's put Zealot in there as a complete like X factor.
Hmm.
Harley, I found I needed for a variety of reasons, but mostly because I needed some levity.
Yeah.
I had a very, I mean, I was planning to write Barda a little more. I see her a little more Kirby-esque than just like a silent warrior type. Like, or like her energy, she
Yeah.
vibrates at a completely different place than Cass to me. And so I want to feel that on the page, even though they have a lot of overlap in other ways. So I knew I was going to be writing Barda a little bit humorous at least, but we need, you know, it was such a serious mission. And these are like these sort of silent killer types. I needed some levity. And
Yeah.
Harley ended up to be a great spot for that. And bonus, Leo really loved drawing her, and she's sort of adorable in it.
Yeah.
You know, her calling the Amazons really beautiful cockroaches, like, you know, just things only Harley Quinn can say and get away with.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun. It's been, I think the whole rolling the cast over as we go, like that's a thing that I guess it's really excites some people and it frustrates other people. I can't really tell, but for me, it's exactly that thing you were talking about what's the scenario in which you get to slam Barda and Cass Kane together. It's
Yeah.
this is it. And so I want to take advantage of that. But I always find that interesting. I mean, that's part of the reason we talked about me loving Elsa Bloodstone and secretly trying to get her everywhere so she'd become super popular and I could write more stuff about her. But, you know, part of the reason I put her in Jessica Jones, I had a big fight with my editor, Alana, about that because she's like, yeah, but she doesn't really belong in this world. Like, she doesn't really, I was like, yeah, but doesn't that make you want to see what it looks like? I
Exactly.
was like, how fun will it be? I was like, let's throw them something they don't usually get to see. And I was like, and also, it's such a wrong-headed thing to say that they don't belong. They live in the same universe. They live in the same city.
Yeah.
Why should they not come across one another? And won't that be fun for us? And I loved
Right.
the stuff that we used Elsa for in Jessica Jones. It was such a
Yeah.
delight. And of course, being drawn by Mattia doesn't hurt.
Oh, no, not at all. No, my answer to that statement would always be like, you know, one time Wolverine's son cut Frank Castle into ribbons and the monsters under the ground put him back together as a Frankenstein. Like,
Yeah.
they're the fun, some of people's treasured runs on characters are the incongruities of this one cohesive universe. Please.
Yes.
And I think that's what Birds
Yes.
of Prey is too. It's like, hey, look at these different facets of the DC universe, all from a feminine perspective, which also isn't like that's not what the book's about, but it is what the book's about. And it's like such a refreshingly delightful series every time. Like I'm like, every time another issue comes, I'm like, oh yay. No. Here we go. More Birds of Prey, where they have this problem, they tackle it, but they also they work together and they highlight their own differences and personalities, and it's just so fun. And
it's been really great. It's you know, I think people joke about that I sort of stealth turn solos into ensemble books, and I do. And I also stealth do it mostly with women. You know,
Spider-Man. That was
I mean, yeah, A-Force was obviously designed to be women, but
sure.
on Captain Marvel, I did it a little bit. I mean, yes, Rhodey was there sometimes, but the primary side characters for most of the run were more like Spider-Woman, Hazmat, and L'Oreal.
Yes.
So, I think I did it on Black Widow. By the end of the book, it was Black Widow, White Widow, Kate Bishop, Hawkeye, Anya, you know, and Lucy, this new character that I created. So you know, even on Captain Marvel later, when we did the X-Men run, it ended up being Captain Marvel, a bunch of female X-Men, and Gambit. So it's like, I like building these ensembles, and I kept getting canceled over at Marvel. I mean, I don't know if that's whatever, but
yeah,
it was very exciting to come and get to do it on Birds of Prey,
Yeah.
with a title where it's already mostly designed that way. I mean, it doesn't have to be women, but it's
No.
primarily women usually. And to just have it already be working and be like, oh, I just have to plug these great characters in and tell some great stories and we're just going to go. And like the fact that I mean, I'm already writing like 19 now and we're just going. It's like such a beautiful thing that it's just
Yeah.
happening. And, but I'm really proud of what we did. I guess I would say to people who didn't love that third arc as much as I do,
Hmm.
um, we still got these incredible things. I mean, Sophie Campbell drawing most of an issue of Birds of Prey in like a sort of cartoony chibi. Like, did you
Oh
ever
my
think
God.
you'd see that? Like,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And like Javier coming in and doing those incredible realistic dinosaurs, just
Yeah.
beautiful issue.
Yeah.
It was all so fun, you know?
Yeah. So Absolute Wonder Woman
All
is
right.
here. Finally, the first issue has dropped. I've been like, this is the book where when the Absolute Universe was announced, you know, you couldn't get away from images of the Absolute Batman, but everybody just the undercurrent of like, yeah, we're all gonna buy Batman. What's up with that Wonder Woman book though? Like everybody being like, this looks kind of effing dope. And going to San Diego Comic-Con, I got to go to that DC panel, and they dropped Hayden Sherman's like designs for Diana and Pegasus, and being like, this is it. Are you kidding? And then
Yeah.
finally it coming out and being like, yep, all right, we were all on board, and now I'm locked in. Before we get into the formation of this book and where like you come in from the Scott / Absolute of it all, I wanted to address a really quick thing. In the book, Absolute Wonder Woman #1 says part 1 of 5. What's up with that?
Yeah, I feel like we actually made a horrible mistake here because these are ongoing books. They're just talking about arcs.
Yeah.
So it's funny because we had this whole conversation and what Chris was like, so do we want to do 1 of 5? Do we just want to do one? Like, do we want to put the arc title on that double page spread? I was like, well, I actually said, well, maybe we don't want to put 1 of 5 because then people think it's a limited series.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, what's Batman doing? And so I went and looked at and I was like, oh, 1 of 5. I was like, okay, well, then we should do it too so that they can see that consistency. But now I feel like we should have gone back in time and said
Yeah.
to Scott, hey, don't do that because people are going to misunderstand this.
Yeah.
No, I just saw someone saying it this morning, like, oh, it's a 5-issue mini. And no. I mean, I don't know if it goes 2 years or 10 years, but they're ongoing books. So
Yeah. So that's great. All right.
hopefully with our incredible first start, we're gonna go as long as possible.
Yeah, the buzz
Amazing
/
week.
sales are very good. We're happy
Yes.
to hear about that. So
Yes.
where did this all start? Like what brought you into this whole space?
So I think like a year ago was the first time Scott talked to me about it, but they were still in early stages. Like I don't know if they were still talking to other people and I was just like on a short list or whatever, or maybe my response wasn't what Scott was looking for. I don't know, but we didn't start anything last year. It wasn't until the spring or maybe it was the winter, but it was in 2024
Mhm.
that he was like, "All right, here's the lay of the land. Here's what we're up to. I think you should do this Wonder Woman book. What do you think? Blah blah blah." And yeah, I was really excited about it. It was a huge opportunity. And so I started working on it right away and I burned a lot of runway. In my mind, it's like a month. I'm not sure how much it is. And I had nothing. And I was about to call Scott and be like, dude, I'm sorry I've screwed you over. I didn't
Mhm.
mean to burn your runway, but I got nothing. This is really hard and I can't figure it out. And like I can't this is a huge stage to fall on my face. So if I either got to bow out or I got to figure it out. And fortunately, among all my scribbled out notes, one of the notes I had was which Wonder Woman, like a not which one, but which like bubbling cauldron. Because
Right.
someone got that wrong in an interview, and I was like, no, it's a WITCH, man.
Mhm.
So which Wonder Woman raised in hell, and then it was like by her enemy question mark, and then it was like Circe with like 5 question marks behind it, and I just knew there was something there, and I was like, "This is it. This is the one." And as soon as I started working on it, it just opened up for me in like the most beautiful way. More than anything I've ever worked on before. It just felt right.
Yeah, yeah. It's man, what a strong showing. We're introduced to this version of Diana in such a bombastic way. This is obviously, the Absolute Universe is has a darker edge to it, but there's so much light and joy and infused in this because it's Diana, and because your approach to the character is absolutely from a perspective of like, Diana is life and hope and love and understanding, and it was so it sounds like Circe was there from the beginning. Like, you were like, raised by enemy, boom, Circe. I mean, like, that angle completely changes anyone's
Yes.
perception and expectation of what
Yes.
book it was.
Yeah.
Particularly, it's funny because there's a scene where like demons fly out of an upside down pyramid, and like a giant like bisected mouth monster tries to eat Diana, but like everyone is talking, at least I think everybody's talking about that beautiful sequence where Circe starts out living in a hovel in a cave with this baby and eventually builds a home out of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, was that always part of you're like,
It was, and I can't tell you how gratifying it is that people care about it, because when you're writing it, you're like, listen, I know they're gonna like this cool fight shit, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't know how they were gonna feel about the sword, because Wonder Woman fans have notoriously been prickly about Diana with a sword, and I get it. I feel the same way, but apparently it turns out if you make the sword absolutely gigantic, their concerns fall away. But
Mhm.
I do think that the gigantic sword suggests something different than a regular sword,
100%.
almost on a primal level that we just none of us figured out. I didn't realize it was going to happen either, but it was like people just understood by seeing that giant sword. They understood that, first of all, it says something about her that a regular sized sword doesn't say. It
Yep.
says something about her power and her skill and her pure strength level, right? Which is really
Yeah.
fun. That just carrying a regular sword has none of that. Two, it seeds, or it should, what kind of threats she's going to be facing, at least in this first arc.
Yeah.
And she's not facing Max Lord or something. She's facing giant monsters who need a sword that looks like a giant shovel. Like, that's what she needs.
Yeah.
So I think the funny thing was, and ironically, it was not supposed to be a sword, it was supposed to be an axe,
Mhm.
but someone famously had already called dibs on an axe for a very specific function of their costume.
Uh-huh.
So we knew we weren't going to win that fight, and Batman was also way ahead of us as far as in the process. So, you got to respect what's come before.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad we made the change, because I think it really worked out for us in every way. Um so people are gonna be into that stuff, but you don't know for sure if they're gonna be into the sensitive and tender mother-daughter relationship in hell, and especially when you're only able to show them a glimpse of it in this first piece.
Yep.
I saw some people complaining that it doesn't seem very hell-like. I mean, it's like one snap of like, I mean, first of all, there are things trying to kill them in several of those panels over
Yep.
that sequence. So, like, let's not say they were just fine. Second of all, it's just a tiniest little taste,
Yeah.
trying to show, like you said, the scenes are not about all the things they weathered while they're there. It's about how they built a home in spite of their surroundings, and how I would say love is transformative,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
that is Diana's credo more than anything, is that love transforms.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing that was truly thrilling, other than people just really getting what we were doing in a really powerful way, was finding ways to make sure people understood she was still the Diana they know and love, despite all these other changes around her. And what it turned out happened was that all that darkness sort of just made her shine even brighter, I think. And it was like a beautiful win for all of us about
Yeah.
what we had and what we were going to be able to build. It was pretty exciting.
Yeah. At what point did Pegasus come into play?
God, I cannot remember when I definitely figured out that she should have a dead Pegasus. How did it happen? You know what? That's a really good question. I can't remember where in the process it was, but there was definitely a thing where I was like, where I asked Hayden about it because people do not want to draw horses. And
Oh, I know. And they have to
a
draw like a skeletal. Like it's not just,
well,
we can't
yeah,
fudge it. You can't hide it. It's like, let's watch the
that's what I'm
skeletal
saying.
movement.
I was like, I listen, Hayden, I don't know. Like, she's not gonna have it in every scene all the time forever, but if we establish this in issue 1, it's gonna be around. And I know people don't want to draw horses. I can't imagine they want to draw horses without their skin and musculature either. Seems even harder. And Hayden was just completely on board. I mean, I also made Hayden draw a Ferris wheel. I mean, these are all things that Sophie Campbell, if I put a motorcycle in the book, she'll just probably come over to my house and throttle me. She's like, you can't just put Ferris wheels and motorcycles in things.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
You got to warn somebody. You got to give somebody some heads up.
So I've tried to talk to Hayden about that. Unfortunately for Hayden, they have an incredible perspective and approach and demeanor. And so they're very up for anything. I think they're in that very like rich, fertile time of their life when they're sort of they take on challenges. They're excited about it. I think I'm too old for that shit. So I'm like, that seems like a lot of work. I don't know, man. But Hayden is really on board for it. And I think we're reaping the benefits of that. That issue is spectacular. And they get everything from those incredible set pieces and those crazy sort of Lovecraftian type of threats to this beautiful warming up of this home, which you know, I had that idea from the beginning, and I had actually talked to Hayden on the phone about it, like, so this is my idea, but if you hate it, like, let's talk about it. And the script was quite detailed about it because I didn't want to leave Hayden having to come up with all those details on their own. So the script was quite detailed, but you know, you never know what they're going to do with it. And gosh, they brought so much to it. And then Jordy coming in and like lighting it in those places so that it just sort of leads the eye with those light spots. Ugh, incredible stuff. It just makes you go, wow, I'm so lucky to be a part of this team. Look at what they're doing. And they're like, you wrote that script. I'm like, did I though? I don't know, man. It's pretty transformed by the time I see it again. It feels incredible.
Now, what was the idea behind the new city, the Gateway City?
Well, so Gateway City is historically a city. It comes from the Perez run, right? Am I getting that right?
I think you're right. Yeah.
I think I've got that
I hadn't even thought about that.
It's a huge faux pas if I've gotten it wrong. I apologize to Wonder Woman fans.
I saw some people talking about it. Like they were some folk had never even heard of it before, and it was like
have a lot of lore. I have a lot of lore and names in my head. I sometimes get them mixed up. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Gateway City. I'm also just a really big fan of Diana having a city. I know some people would say she has Themyscira, but I mean that's not ever going to be her base. That can be her home, but it's her home a little bit in the way Clark's home is Krypton, right? And he still has Kansas and Metropolis,
right?
You know, so it doesn't make any sense to me that she wouldn't have the city. Also, Gateway City is a great idea. It's particularly a great idea for this new universe. And it's so the concept of Gateway City vaguely is that it was built on some kind of not Hellmouth like Sunnydale, but not that dissimilar, where it was on like the remains of a demon something. So it's the idea that it's a gateway to other places. And that's where the name comes from. It's also on the West Coast. It's got sort of a San Francisco vibe, although I'd say it's maybe a little more southern than San Francisco. You get a little more warmth and sunny days, but yeah, we'll be
more San Diego kind of like we
yeah, but it is more San Francisco than that. It's maybe it's more like Santa Barbara. I don't know. It's like the vibe is more San Francisco, but
we gotta set it up ahead of time because listen, people have been I was at New York Comic Con just this past weekend, and I was pulled into a discussion about where Gotham is still. And I'm like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm from Jersey, so I'm like, no, Gotham's in Jersey. But the Metropolis thing, I'm like, no. So if we're gonna establish new universe, Gateway City, all right, West Coast, close to Santa Barbara. All right, that at least
Yeah,
it gives us a
I would
vague.
say San Francisco is the
It's
good
a good
place to
stand-in.
set it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good stand-in for it.
cool. All
The
right,
same way Gotham is clearly a stand-in for New
for
York
New
City.
York.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say.
No, I agree. No, I listen. Gotham is, and I was okay with that until DC was like, oh, and by the way, here's New York, and I'm like, oh, well, now what are we doing?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. A very
You
good
know.
point.
But yeah, so you're ahead as far as this book's concerned in terms of your planning.
Yeah.
But what can you tease anything about like where we're going with this, like what we might see, or absolute versions of things? Like there's a thing that my wife pointed out, because she's like 10 times smarter than I am, and so we were reviewing this book, and I was like, yeah, it was really cool, I like the sword, and she was like, I love the fact that her introduction to, like, we forego the Steve Trevor, and instead the stand-in for Steve Trevor is that her first human interaction in this book is with the military. And I was like, yes, fair enough. Okay.
So it's hard. This is a book that's hard to tease. I think once
Yeah,
people have seen issue one, they sort of understand a little better why we're protecting some of those secrets. Like
100%.
I was guarding the Circe thing with my life, not just because
I didn't know it was there at all.
I thought not only because I thought it would be a big deal, but also because, we only have like two named characters that people will recognize in the whole thing. So we didn't have the sort of Batman situation where you've got a lot of cameos and like
Yeah,
the city stuff is really layered. Like where ours is opening a little more like a flower, whereas I feel like, Batman is more of like you get that deluge of information and these characters and these setups and these Easter eggs for these things that are coming,
right.
where our approach is just a little different in how we execute. And I love that we can both do that and they both work and fit together. Anyway,
Yeah.
but so we will definitely, in this first arc, you will see Steve, Etta, and Barbara Minerva.
Mm,
So you will get all of those characters at a minimum. We'll also get some more really fun weapon stuff. Like you get the debut of the lasso, the red lasso at the end of issue one.
yeah.
You'll be seeing more of that in issue two. Um, you meet Steve in two. You meet Barbara in three. You'll meet
Mm,
Etta in four. So that's sort of how we're going right now.
yeah. Just you brought up the lasso, and how again, my wife brought this up, where she was just like Circe being like, if you prove your love by letting her go,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean I'm gonna leave her defenseless. And just all
Yeah.
these weapons in her arsenal, and being
Yeah.
like the definition of her, where I'm Diana of Themyscira, I'm last daughter of the
Yeah.
Amazon, daughter of Circe, Princess of Hell, Witch of the Wild Isle, like just these amazing. And I'm not gonna leave any of them out, because any one of them could be a dope miniseries from Black Label, but instead it's all one book you can get for a low price from the absolute launch. It's just great, just really cool.
Thank you so much. I'm
Oh,
so
thank
glad you
you for
like
this
it.
great book.
It's
Yeah.
been, you work on something like this for so long and you rarely get the week we just had where, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just been, that was the thing I was going to say back before when you were talking about the initial design, like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it getting out there in the world. Like, it's the most I've ever experienced, like, pure praise for something I've done. Like, because there's always dissenting,
Oh, sure.
whatever, but the dissenting voices on the design on this first issue, on all, they've been very minimal. And it's rewarding when you've worked as hard and as long as we've worked and it's finally out there. Like, it's really great. It
Yeah,
is a little sad because you often work that hard and it doesn't go that well, but it's
sure.
you try to enjoy the win when you get it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, Absolute Wonder Woman is. I remember that tease, just seeing the picture. I'm just like, I don't know what, like, just and it was really smart to pair her with Pegasus immediately, just being like her riding this skeletal dead horse from hell, and knowing the pitch is Diana
Yeah.
from hell. Like,
Yeah.
we're on board. That's pretty
I
dope.
I also thought, she flies at the end, on the
That's
last
right.
page there. So, well, she sort of flies before that, although you could make an argument maybe she's just jumping and falling or whatever. But
Mm,
the first time we definitely see her fly is on the last page, and we
yeah.
were trying to hide that because people assumed because she had the Pegasus that she couldn't fly, and I was like, whatever. Could she not fly all the time that she had the plane, which I hate? So,
Right.
it's like
Well, and I love the idea that like the Pegasus almost like replaces the plane. Like, you could
yeah,
see through the plane, you could see through the horse.
yeah.
And it's like a stand-in. But
The
yeah.
Pegasus just makes so much more sense to me than a plane because she talks to animals and
Yeah.
she makes connections with things. She's not really about
Technology. Like
yeah,
or man.
technology. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Was it your idea or Hayden's idea to put little Pegasus in the cave?
Well, so I've seen people saying that's not
Oh, it's
Pegasus.
not Pegasus. I thought that was like
No,
raised, like she raised
no, no,
Pegasus from like
no.
a baby
I mean,
skeletal horse.
how can it be Pegasus? It doesn't have wings and it does look like it has a horn. Why don't
Oh
people
yeah,
know they're
it's a dead
fantasy
unicorn.
creatures?
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a little shriveled unicorn thing that we will be seeing more of, but
Oh, good. Okay.
it is not the same as Pegasus.
Fair. All right. Cool.
And don't feel bad because you weren't alone. I saw
All
other
right.
people getting excited about it too. And honestly, they were so cute and excited about it. I didn't want to disavow them of it, so I just didn't
Yeah.
say anything.
All right.
But you will see Pegasus being born/reborn in issue 6.
Nice. All right. Which
Yeah.
proves that this is not a 5-issue miniseries, ladies and
There you go. There you
But
go.
well, Ellie, I could talk to you all day. I want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insights on some of these books. It's my fault for not being able to reach out for so long that I've unfortunately had to like just shotgun all of my interest in one fell swoop. But we'd love to have you back to talk more about this and more if
I'd
you're
love to
interested.
come back. Yeah,
Uh,
anytime. Thanks so much
but
for having me.
my pleasure. But before we go, where can the folks see what you're working on, or whatever they want to,
Sure,
take this
sure.
opportunity to plug the hell out of it.
With the continued collapse of social media, the best place to find me is on Substack. I've got a free newsletter there so that you can stay in touch. It's 1979 semifinalist.substack.com. There's also a paid letter where you can get more stuff like contest giveaways and access to comics and the ability to comment and things like that. But if you just want to stay in touch and you're worried about losing connection because of Twitter and everything, that is really the best way to do it. On Twitter, I remain 79 semifinalist, though as the AI stuff comes in next month, I'll be there less and less and less. I think you'll find that's true of everyone who does
Yep.
art. And I am on Blue Sky at just Kelly Thompson. So
Nice.
find me over there. Yeah.
There you are. Well, thanks a lot for being here, and we'll see you guys next time with all new episode.